Greetings and welcome to another installation in this story of the Caribbean Sea, the life and times of the Caribbean Sea. And as we begin our journey this morning, we have started out with a conversation with the communication director for UNEP, and we move now to another person who has a big picture vision of the Caribbean Sea. I'm speaking with no other than Dr. Asha Singh, who is in the beautiful island of St. Lucia, and I have swum there in less than 10 seconds from Jamaica to have a conversation with her. So Dr. Singh, Dr. Asha Singh, how are you this morning?
I'm well, Claire. It's very bad weather here today. We seem to have a tropical storm, but other than that, it's very good. Thank you for having me on this esteemed day of celebrating oceans and zooming in on the beautiful Caribbean Sea.
Yes, I'm so delighted you could join us. One of the things that I had a chance to learn the last couple of years since we have created this Caribbean Sea Fan colony of friends and colleagues that love and care about the sea is the issue of governance, right? The first time I got engaged with this topic and I learned that there were 36 territories, language challenges, and I'm talking about countries, but within each country you might have 5 to 6 different agencies that are cross-cutting issues, and it's really a data management and policy management nightmare. So tell me, how are we going to find a way to just manage the conversation? I've been hearing about this blue economy. Is this new lens by which to view this space called the Caribbean Sea possibly the answer to a better entry point to changing the way we talk about the sea?
Um, well, the blue economy is just turning the conversation more to an economic perspective. Prior to us really talking about the blue economy, we used to talk about how do we conserve and manage the Caribbean Sea. We recognize the habitats and ecosystems are crucial to our well-being, but also that we are putting a lot of pressure on the Caribbean Sea. However, now what we're seeing is that there's a renewed recognition, a recognition towards not only conserving the Caribbean Sea and the ecosystems for greater human well-being, but harnessing those resources to support greater human well-being. Why this is important for the Caribbean, as you rightly said, 33 countries that extend jurisdiction on the Caribbean Sea. It's a very crowded sea when we talk about governance. So the blue economy now is where many countries are looking to the blue space as the new economic option. For example, in the Caribbean small island states, when you look at the economic activities with the global downturn and all that is happening externally, and climate change, etc., a growing population, we are seeing that many of the terrestrial type of economic activities that we once used to rely on, it's actually dwindling. We're not finding new niches. But when you look beyond those small islands or even in the coastal area of the larger countries that has jurisdiction on the Caribbean Sea, many of them has many times more marine space than land, and it's pretty much an unused area. But more and more, the global community and the scientists, policymakers are beginning to coalesce around an issue of economics. And this is where, in my opinion, that perhaps the blue economy is going to make us start thinking, rather than looking at the Caribbean Sea from a sympathetic standpoint that we need to conserve it, we are now talking about a viable economic space. And in order for us to really harness that economic space from a blue economy standpoint, we need to manage the resources, including conservation.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question because when people start talking about economics, I know the marketplace. They just think about money, 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 but there's some things in the sea you can't measure with money. You can't measure with money the pleasure of being able to go to a beautiful pink sand beach if you're in the Bahamas, or white sand beach if you're anywhere in the Caribbean, or black volcanic sand beach if you're in St. Vincent or Dominica. You can't measure that, right? So
Yes.
I want us to be clear when we're talking about blue economy. It's in a new sense of the word economy, recognizing that the earth itself has the right to also exist in a sustainable, flourishing fashion. And indeed, our not managing this economy properly will allow us to basically kill off our own future. And so
Yes.
we have to find a way to make sure from the early start of this new paradigm shift that we're talking about not killing off our future by making sure it's really proper management, sound management, and management for future generations. That said, we're still back to square one. How are we going to manage all this data? Because I am sure the people who are saying modeling coral reef bleaching may not be able to necessarily talk the same language as the people who are modeling wave action to do ocean energy or wave energy. How do people like yourself, who are good governance people, who are system thinkers, how do we get in place now a conversation about decision support systems and models and things that are easy to understand, not obscure academic mathematical theory that is only, you know, Mr. Einstein's ghost can understand, but things that our politicians can understand. How do we move that conversation in that direction?
I think it has to be multifaceted, Claire, because one is that we cannot discount the science, but what we need to do is to speak the language in such a way. We need to translate those information that is very scientifically based to one that you and I, the normal, the common man could understand. Having said that, I think it needs to be a shift in our system as to how we think. We always think of this speaking this language, and we target a specific set of people like policymakers. But I think if we really need to move to a paradigm shift, we need to start inculcate those thinking from a very young age. So the very school system also need to
Yes.
start speaking those languages.
Yes.
When you look at the school curriculum in the Caribbean, it's very
Oh,
much centered to just science based, but no one speaks about a stronger science policy interface. So I
yes.
think that that is very important. Secondly,
Yes.
when we talk about data, many times we talk about data and we talk about data in isolation. What we need, and I'm a very strong advocate for us to have common platform, that data becomes far more accessible
Yes.
and that data transforms into information. So we
Yes.
tell a story about the data rather
Yes.
than
Yes.
saying
Yes.
this is what it's saying. So when you ask me about coral bleaching, I can say in one sentence, clear the coral, what we have found, the scientists have found that there is a bleach of this parts per million. What is the implication of that bleach? The bleach is that
Exactly.
this is what it can cause, and how does that extend to affecting the normal man in the street, you and I, as citizens of the globe, and but also citizens of our country. So I think we need a revolution as to how do we deal with data, but not seeing data solely for what it is as numbers, but translating that into greater storytelling. And I don't think that we're short of storytelling. We're from a region that is so rich culturally that we are
Exactly.
good storytellers. So I think
Exactly.
that there is a niche for us, like people like yourselves, that who can able to tell that story, can come to a scientist and speak to a scientist, but not reporting what the scientist exactly said, but translating that into a story. And I think we need more of that. And so I would advocate for more platform for common data sharing, but secondly, to take that up to a level higher, to have these data translated information, and then further that information used to support greater decision making, because any sound decision making is grounded in science, and at the same time it's done across the board, civil society, the school children. So we need a revolution also in our education system as to how do we start speaking environment, sustainable development, ocean governance, because we all need to play a role if we are to have effective governance.
Exactly. On this spaceship, there's no captains. All of us have to
Yeah.
be co-captains. On that note, you're in St. Lucia. Tell me about how the site got some fits into this sort of ocean management? Because I'm hearing that it really has been very damaging or can be even more damaging, but because it's seasonal, it's kind of really hard to manage. So what have you been thinking about what we can do different? I know sometimes in the region people want to say, where has that been done before? Well, if you're at the frontier of development, it will never have been done before. So what are some ideas you might want to have us think about as we create the conditions for thinking anew about solving the problem of the red sargassum, which I understand is threatening the Eastern Caribbean region?
Yes, I think one of the things I want to advocate here, Claire, that now the sargassum is having a very bad rap because it's coming onto our shore in tons and in magnitudes that we have never seen, and it's affecting our tourism product. But apart from that, setting that aside for now, I want to really advocate that the sargassum is a critical habitat. It's a critical species. The sargassum, in some species, spends its entire life on the sargassum. Sargassum occupies some of our poorest seas in the world. Now, what we're seeing over the last couple of years.
Okay. Stop. So the sargassum is not just like dead weed floating.
No, it's not.
You
It
see?
is
You
it
see?
is a living habitat. However, after it loses its buoyancy, it has some things like you call like bulbs, and that actually has a lot of gas in it. And over time, when sargassum floats, it actually loses the buoyancy. It drops down to some of the poorest sea parts of the sea, and it forms good nutrient during upwelling time. That is when the ocean
Ah.
currents are churning, and that is where we get our fish food, and it's the food web.
Ah.
So it's very important, and we must not forget the efforts that are needed to ensure that that habitat remain as it is.
So we have
However,
to
what
find
we
a
are
way.
seeing.
So then, really, the sargassum is the devil you may have to live with. You're saying.
Of course, because what we're seeing, and though the science is still emerging, is that with the onset of climate change, increased carbon dioxide emission that is falling onto the ocean, CO2, carbon dioxide, when it interacts with the seawater, it changes into carbonic acid. So what it does, so ocean acidification now affect the coral reefs, but what it does, you have more food for plants, so you're getting greater growth of sargassum
Ah.
as well. So think about CO2, carbon dioxide, it's giving off, it gets oxygen, it's affecting the coral reef, but on the flip side, it's also, we are seeing greener growth. Now, the science is still very sparse on that, so no one wants to say that that is the problem. Secondly, we are seeing a lot of greater land-based sources of pollution
Ah.
into the environment from the Caribbean and Latin America region. And that is also changing the way, and that is increasing the growth of sargassum. One of the worrying things, though, that we're seeing in the Caribbean is that first we used to find a lot of the sargassum coming out of the Sargasso Sea, which is just upper of the Atlantic, within the Atlantic Ocean. Now what we are seeing are new species that are coming from the Brazil shelf. So we're
Ah.
seeing more and different type of sargassum, and we really do not know how to deal with that. Now, I would want to say that for us in the Caribbean, more research is needed to ascertain the status of sargassum, to do some scenario modeling. Though that is very difficult because we really do not know the source very much as well as yet.
Yes.
But we need to manage it. What we need to do is to find alternative options for sargassum. That's one.
Yes.
Sargassum offers some potential for biostimulants. We are seeing across the Caribbean small entrepreneurs who are now using that, processing it for biostimulant, fertilizer, detergent, etc. We need to start playing that up. Secondly, is that when sargassum hits onto our shore, it's a logistic nightmare, and I think we need to find a way as to how do we manage it. And I think now countries really need to have sargassum plans and sargassum ways of looking at how do we convert that problem but into a solution. think that if we're blue, green, and whatever economy that we're thinking of, sargassum still do hold potential for great economic returns. The challenges, though, is to have greater public-private partnership because sargassum is still seasonal. Last
Yes,
year we had a ton of it on our shores. We're not sure as to what it will be this year.
yes.
So when you're looking at investment potential, no one wants to have their raw material that they do not know where it's going to come from. So we also need to look at that. But I think that the two messages that I want to take away from that you to take away from this is that sargassum is very important for the
Yes,
functioning of the habitats and the
yes,
ecosystems in the
yes.
Caribbean. And secondly, while it is a logistical nightmare when it hits onto our shore because it takes away the tourists, it's a scent, it's also a health problem. We also need to find how do we convert those sargassum into possible economic venture. And there are research that are being done across the world that we can lean on.
And as we say in Jamaica, and I'm sure you have a same phrase in Guyana, if you turn your hand, make fashion. So you take something that's meant to be bad and turn it into something else. And boy, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you. There's so much more we can talk about, but this have to wrap up. So as we go, I just want to again come back to our original starting point, governance and data. I think we're in a new era of data gathering. I think with all these cell phones and smartphones around the country, I think, as you said, with the students being now beginning to be educated about the sea much more than we were, certainly,
Yes.
and that some schools have tablets and smartphones in the schools. I know of young people who are trying to create solutions for poor schools to be able to have Wi-Fi in their poor schools. So I know that in the next 5 years, almost every school will have access to internet. How can we change the game? How can we have a revolution, as you said, a data revolution, a mindset evolution to really make a difference in how we look at the sea and create a flourishing, thriving existence? So one last set of words I want you to tell me is to begin the sentence and end it in your own words. Life needs the Caribbean Sea
Because of all the services that the Caribbean Sea provide to us, and we should not underestimate that sea for our human well-being, but more so for all the rich culture that those water hits onto our shore every day for us.
thank you so much. Folk, we've been speaking to Dr. Asha Singh. She is a well-known ocean governance expert in the Caribbean region. It's been my delight to visit with her in stormy yet sometimes sunny Castries, St. Lucia. Take care.
Thank you, Claire, and happy Oceans Day. Happy Oceans Day to all our viewers. Come on board with us.
Thank